And we're live. Welcome everyone for a somewhat delayed unblocking. How are you all?
Very quiet, it seems.
Sounds it. What's living that's keeping everybody preoccupied internally?
Tammy. Hi.
Hey, lovely humans. How's it going?
Hello, guys. Now, where are you geographically now?
We're at Harry's house.
Ah,
Hey, Amanda. How's it going?
I unmute myself. I'm good. I
Awesome.
just put down a former NUMEC friend. So I'm late. Yeah.
Or maybe right on time.
I'm on time. I don't know.
you're right on time. We literally just hit record.
Ah, good. Wow.
Clearly something was saying wait.
Yes. Well, maybe it was Shannon. I was hanging up with Shannon. She said, I have to go. I said, okay. So.
I'm not sure whether Les is connected or not because he's been sort of frozen.
He looks frozen and perhaps dropped, personally. He has that sort of frozen look.
Yeah, distinctly
He
possible.
just wrote something in the chat
Yes.
to say hello. So maybe that's how he's going to
Good day all.
communicate.
Hope all having a great weekend.
Sweet.
So I just asked for initial check-ins for anybody that has anything that's moving for them or not. And there was a deafening silence.
Oh,
Good.
the emptiness is the everything.
Yeah, so the second question was, so what's living inside you that has you preoccupied internally?
Well, I would start with just went on a bit of an artist date with Harry into the world. And I was interested in taking pictures of mushrooms because they're amazing right now. They're just taking over the forests here. And there was these huge colonies that I saw yesterday. So we went on a little mushroom forest tour. And on the way, we had a cup of coffee with a good friend, Jean-Paul Close.
Closer, yeah.
Who's an amazing human. And he was with his mom having a lunch. So we joined them and it was awesome. And then we went and checked out the gardens. I don't know, I just love the changing of the seasons and what happens and little mushrooms everywhere that were so interesting. And then we ended up at the graveyard right beside Harry's place here and came across all these crazy other colonies of mushrooms and the Amanacasera or whatever, what are the big red ones with the dots?
Vliegenzwam.
Anyways, we came across some families of those mushrooms and it was just beautiful. The beauty in the little things. So I've been landing and grounding and arriving in a new time zone and place and looking into what's next.
Yeah, and this weekend was about, okay, I know there's a pile of obligations, expectations, administrations, and plans waiting on my desk. And I just don't feel like going there yet. But they keep piling up, of course. And I have promises I made and things I have to do. But it's a beautiful autumn day that I just thought, well, this is more alive in me right now.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Can I go?
You can.
Tammy,
Go girl.
they call those mushrooms also red with white dots. I have a toy store here. It's called Red with White Dots, and it's the famous one from all the fairy tales. I just hang up Shannon, and she's announcing a tour in 2020, which is called a fairy tour from I don't know, and through the entire North Americas. It's gonna be a walk, and it's like a transformative thing. I don't know. I have to look at it, but it's interesting. And then on the administration part, it's interesting when you wait long enough, Harry, then the administration leaves you. I have some of that experience. The tax office was like, oh, you stopped, you're outside the Netherlands. Oh, we'll unsubscribe you, just like that. So it's interesting how that coincidence can happen as well. What's living inside of me? I don't know. I just have a very light and happy day. Yeah, I organized myself here, so I was still landing in another time zone for 2 weeks also, but I reorganized my place, and now I'm going to do meditational retreat. After 1 week, I will go there, and yeah, it's getting sorted out. So I'm kind of happy. Was that your question, Doug? It was what lives inside of you, and
You're muted.
You're muted,
Oh.
Doug.
I said if you are not saying anything, what's got you preoccupied internally?
Internally. I don't know yet. That's why I'm going on a meditational retreat. I think a lot of things happened the last 6 months. It has been really heavy in some aspects, and I met some very existential and essential themes there on leadership and humanity and pain, and there's a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna sit on that actually. So I'm going to my Zen monastery in the north of the Netherlands, and I'm taking probably, maybe he didn't say yes yet, probably a teacher of my a teacher of the Tibetan stream, who is also very close to Soto, but he was doubting where he has to go. There's other things also going on, and so this is his first koan actually, whether he chooses to be fully present or not. And I didn't hear, but it probably would take him there, and which would be very special. He's 81. So.
Anna?
I will excuse myself for like 10 or 15 minutes because I ordered food and I have to get it at the Chinese restaurant.
Yummy.
Next weekend, I'm going to a retreat in London, a Course in Miracles retreat in London for a weekend. And that's the first time that I've done that. So I've got a B&B right near to the place where it's happening. And I'm really looking forward to that. I feel very, oh, Les has woken up. He seems to be moving. The other thing that's been really exciting for me is that my son Joel is coming over to visit in November, and he's coming just for a few days because he has a college reunion. But Ella, my daughter, took that as an opportunity to get the family together. So my 3 kids, my ex-husband, who was married to Sandy, I think you would know who that was, Tammy, because she passed earlier this year. Yeah, we're going to be a family again, my 3 kids and Paul and myself. So it's, we haven't been a family like that for about 40 years. It's going to be quite an experience. I have no idea how it's going to work out, but I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, Ella is leaving her kids at home with her husband, and we're just going to be the four of us, five of us. Yeah.
Is this literally a first in 40 years?
More or less, yes, because we've always been with others. Paul has always had other children and other women around. And yeah, I don't think we've ever actually spent time together like this. So it's sort of interesting because at the moment in A Course in Miracles, I'm going through a section which is about special relationships. It's looking at special relationships as how the ego uses special relationships to boost its view of itself so that it feels special. And it's very much accepted in our culture that those special relationships are part of our everyday culture, but they are very, what's the word, exclusive. You know, in one way, they combine people together, but in another way, they exclude people. So the family, for example, excludes other people from the family. So A Course in Miracles in general talks about being aware that that these special relationships, like romantic relationships, for example, can be used by the ego, but also they can be they can have another purpose if you're aware of wanting to give them, if say a higher purpose. So they can be used in that way too. So thinking of my family, I don't know which way it's going to be. And it's sort of just not getting attached to the family as a family. It's sort of understanding that these sort of conventional attachments are not necessarily beneficial or useful for if you're dedicated to saving the world, for example. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Can you unpack that a little bit more? I'm sorry to sort of not let you off the hook, but I'm sort of curious what is it in this codependence use of these relationships or categories that they're not useful? Like what's the dimension of it for that your sense making?
Can I read you something which
Sure.
might make it clearer?
Sure.
Rather than me trying to. Might take me a little while to find it.
Okay, we've got time.
Okay. Oh no, this is not it either.
The only reason I'm asking is because I had, this is sort of the second conversation in the last 3 days around the idea of the sort of meme and idea of family and how that qualifies the relationships / quality of
Failing.
connections. I'm sorry?
What was it that you said?
Family.
A family,
Oh, family. Sorry.
around family and sort of what's the superimposition on relationship / connection between people in a family. You know, what is the family dimension as a qualifier? Like, how does that work? And of course, it invokes all sorts of how it should work, how it's supposed to work, what the cultural paradigm says it means as a projection onto, as opposed to organically felt or internalized. And, you know, the whole construct, you know, there's clearly an organic and natural world version, but then there's our version of what we did to it. And what's done in the name of, at the expense of the people that occupy families or fall into families. So it's actually really deep water.
It is very deep water. Yeah. And it's, I guess it's something to do with the sort of preconceptions that we bring and expectations that we bring somehow to the family, so that we are unlikely to be able to see the individuals as clearly as if we didn't have a family relationship with them. It sort of gets, you could say, distorted or certainly influenced by what we think a parent-child relationship should be, or what we think a wife-husband relationship could be. I mean, all those ideas come in and superimpose on top of. And recently, my sister, who is now the oldest member of my mother's side of the family, and recently there was a spate of emails between all the members of the family. Some of them are in Israel, some of them in America, some of them in England, all dotted around and all sort of saying they'd like to meet up or connect up. And I was talking to my sister this morning, and she was saying, you know, there's a sort of assumption that because you're family, there is a closeness. And in a way that's undeniable, because you do share a past. But what the significance of it is, it's deep water, like you say. I mean, you know, Christmas coming up and people talking about how some families really celebrate Christmas. Otherwise, other families, you know, find it horrific because everybody argues. I mean, it's but in particular, in A Course in Miracles, it has a particular significance because of this emphasis on special relationships and how special relationships can feed the ego, as opposed to bringing real value to relationships. So I'll keep trying to find this other thing which actually puts it very clearly, but I haven't found.
Yeah, Amanda?
I'm tempted, but let's do the check-in round. Otherwise, we'll get into a sidetrack.
Jazz? Do you have any check-in for us? No? Colin, do you have a check-in for us?
I guess not. We'll just go with letting what's happening. I think we're well into it.
That's allowed. Les, do you have a check-in? By the way, your thumb, as is your want usually, is again over your camera. So I think it's your left thumb. So wherever it currently is, move it, and we'll have
That's
you.
it.
There we
You've
go.
done it. Great.
You've got it. Perfect. I can unmute you if you're having difficulty unmuting. Or not. Oh, you're unmuted, Les.
Hello?
Yep, we can
Yay.
hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you. There you are.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm alive. I'm just listening to everybody sharing their feelings about what's going on in their life, and makes me feel like I'm a human being, part of the race.
Welcome
Hey,
to.
Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the part of the problem is that we don't want to be accepted in the human race because of our own self being. So maybe we're just trying to hide a lot of our illness feelings about ourselves and can't be honest and just accept, well, that's just being human. What do you think, Doug?
I think that describes the human condition and the culture we've built for ourselves. There are some serious forces.
Well, yeah, that's true.
There are some serious
That's true.
forces out there that have been hell-bent and determined to keep us from talking to each other.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, everybody can talk about all these forces and energies and beliefs, but when it comes down to it, it's where you're at the moment in your mind and how it relates to everything else. And if you can't relate it to something and feel important to something, I guess you're lost, right? I think everybody wants to feel like they belong to something good. I mean, if, in some ways, even if they do have some kind of ill nature, but they still want to belong, even if it's to the wrong group. They still want to belong. That's part of our human instinct, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I think that for myself, I can only share what I feel like everybody else does, and I can be honest with my feelings of what I go through emotionally, and I don't feel bad at all telling them about my emotional problems and everything at this point because I think it's something that's common with a lot of people. If I've had depression most of my life and I'm able to manage it but still get some good things in my life, do good things, and if you count the X's and the O's, and if those are the good things and I have more good things going, then just try to build from there. Build on the good things, right? Now you can be an analytical person or a very educated person, but that doesn't mean that you're happy, right? You can be smart as the tack, And a lot of, you can have all kinds of money, but that doesn't bring you happiness. So goes back to the original thesis of what what human beings are here for, and I think it goes back. Someone said pursuit of happiness, and that comes in different forms. So I don't know. I mean, if you live in an indigenous place in the world where there's no internet, no anything, and you've got people that are in the same environment, and I think that you've got the opportunity to develop a community type cohesiveness easier than what we live in this world because of all the stress and that is around us and distractions that keep us focused on good things. And I think it causes a lot of internal problems and family problems and all that sort of thing. So I think you just have to be a person that's very aware of what's going on and be in the moment to understand what's good and bad, and practice that as well as practicing everything else you do. So that's where I'm at. I think we had you know what I'm doing. I already had that discussion when you told me to bring it up at some point, but I'm not going to bring it up until you want to bring it up. But that's part of being on the inside, what we were talking about, right, Doug?
Absolutely.
That global, that big global project I was thinking about. But anyway, if you want to bring that, talk with everybody else, and if leave me to fill in your when everybody gets quiet. I just want to say hello to everybody. I love to listen to everybody's conversation. Everybody looks beautiful and great today, even if I don't see you.
Now I know. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to unmute you prematurely. Were you done?
Well, I mean, I could talk a little bit about my aspiration there of my abstract concept of mental health, which is what I think that we're actually kind of talking around. Which when you talk about personal stuff, it has to do with our mental health. So my focus, because of my experiences with family and myself, and depression, I think mental health to me is close to home. That I like to focus on the positive things that we can talk about mental health and the language and the way we communicate and the way we understand mental health and the parts that we don't understand, try to understand them better when people are affected in a bad way. I don't like the way we talk about when people are having mental health struggles. They do not communicate it in a compassionate way. It's always labeled. So, by golly, that's why we have stigmas, Doug. We created ourselves because of the language. So if somebody's feeling depressed and they talk about and they hear and read about the doctor talk about this and everybody else talks about it, and you can't work around people that are have an emotional disorder, they don't know them, then all of a sudden you're victimized. So this is what kind of society we live in. I think it's very unacceptable to me. And I know it hits you the same way because the little bit we talked about it. We're on. I think on this subject we agree on it, right?
Yeah, I'm a real anarchist when it comes to the current Western medical approach to the whole construct of mental health. And mental is just a staggeringly primitive reduction of a person's state of being. And the concept of health, which is really about imposing a judgment about what is acceptable and not acceptable, what's healthy, what's not healthy, is also a complete crock of shit. So I don't have a lot of use for any of that. And the whole sort of PDR, coding of human beings that are psychologically and mentally acceptable and not acceptable, healthy, not healthy. I think there's just an infinitely richer and more diverse array of states of being. And that people fill that bell curve robustly and diversely. And the concept of who's healthy and who isn't, who's normal and who isn't, is just insane. I'm much more interested in who's in fear, because the folks that are in love are going to generally be okay, whatever their state is. But the people who are in fear and who are experiencing challenges find help and support and connection, not judgment, marginalization, and isolation and containment, which seems to be the current approach. So that's my version on this stuff.
Well, do you have, Doug, can I ask you something?
Sure.
Do you live around people? Have you experienced people that have a mental health instability where you're close enough where it affects you? Or have you suffered yourself?
I've not, suffered myself. I've gone through a process over the arc of my life, and for the first 2/3 of it, I would say, looking back, that I was completely disconnected, emotionally handicapped, and challenged with how much awareness I had of the world around me and myself. And my, there was a rather extensive process of working through that, of sort of getting back to me. And so that's been my frame of reference. But I do coaching and I teach workshops, and the workshop in particular is a real sort of meet your maker kind of deal for folks who are dealing with shadows, or dealing with blocks, or dealing with challenges in their life that they haven't been able to reconcile, and helping them to do that. And so I've had a lot of contact with the domain, with the territory of helping people. And I'm generally more appalled rather than less at the professional offerings, pharmaceuticalization of offerings, and the opinions and constructs of the sort of experts and the professionals. I think a staggering number of them just don't have the faintest clue of how human beings, as living things, work.
Well, I agree with you. Hey, Doug, I'd like to hear what the other members here say about what we've been talking about.
I'm with you. Anna, you got your finger raised.
Yeah, well, we know that the pharmaceutical industry is run for profit, not for people. and they don't have an interest really in making people better, because they would obviously lose money if people could manage without their medicine. So the whole thing is completely tied up from the beginning. And I was thinking about Greta Thunberg and how it came out that she was some sort of on the range of some sort of autism, and was criticized. And I mean, that was a big shock to me, because over here, I live in an area where there are many people who claim disability allowance because they can't work for mental reasons. And so, you know, this idea of people being, you know, some sort of stigma attached to having a psychological condition, it's not something that I'm familiar with on a personal level. It just feels like where I am, there's just a range of tolerance of everybody, whoever they are. You know, we cater for homeless people and people that are on the street, and you know, oddballs, and it's everybody is part of the mix, and it's fine.
I was just thinking of last question, and I was thinking, who has no experience at all being part of somebody's life, you know, suffering or having problems or going through some journey yourself? I think we all have some experience, at least,
Yeah.
if we are aware. Unless we fire ourselves. And for Anna, I feel like you're leaving the third dimension clearly. But I sometimes I feel like I never understood the third dimension in the first place. So I'm also in some sort of evaluation in that sense. We speak about
What's the
relations
third
and what they mean.
What's the third dimension?
Oh God. Well, it's basically what you describe a bit. It's like this usury stage of, you know, like, how do you say that? It's an endless ping pong. So if somebody does something wrong and the other one hates the other person, and then the other one reacts instead of responds, and you never heal anything, and you react. It's like tennis. It's my simplest explanation for the third dimension. And most of our policy is made from the third dimension. Our politics are the third dimension. Our news broadcast is the third dimension. It's tennis. If I look at the television, it's like ping pong, react. And it's no sense. I'm just waiting until they start to make sense. And I basically experienced the world like everybody in politics, like 8 years old or 11 max. It's like they never grow up. And then you get those friends that, you know, they complain that they're in an endless ping pong. And I joke with some of them. I say, look, you're in ping pong. It's okay. You'll get out of it. I know it's suffering now. You'll get out of that stage. You're going. So it's okay. So I'm, well, just some perspective from my side. And relationship-wise, I never understood the whole thing. So
I would call that polarization, what you're calling the third dimension. I think I would call polarization in politics and yeah.
But we do it in our relationships also. So it's like you're expected to move a certain way. And if you're not, then you're polarized against what's normal. if you're mentally ill, you're polarized against what's supposedly normal. So you can never make your own way in there. It's like either or. You're supposed to be stuck.
Well, it's sort of the cultural frame, the whole education, imprinting, training, and generational epigenetic rolling over of this is, my parents gave me the best they knew how, as little as that was, and as insane as that was. And then I'm charged to make sense out of what I don't know. And the whole system is set up, and to me is rooted in fear. It's really sort of instill fear and stoke that. And the whole competition, the whole power over, the whole scarcity meme, emotionally, physically, in terms of acknowledgement, validation, recognition. The whole thing is just fear rooted. And I remember, for me, the moment of liberation of that, like the moment I stepped out of that and sort of, quit. Said, I'm not doing that. I'm not buying into that. I'm not living under that. It's not driving or informing who I am, what I do. And I was just very aware of the feeling of like being freed. Like, that it was like being freed from a kind of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what it took to achieve that was horrendous in terms of the sort of psychological, emotional, circumstantial cauldron that generated the pressure and the heat to transform and drive me to make that choice. Like, it wasn't I woke up one day and said, I'm just not going to be afraid.
I'm smiling, Doc, because with me it's like January 6, 2012 at 14 hours 30 p.m. It's possible.
I have the same kind of like day. I can remember where I was,
Good.
what room I was in, what time of day it was, like all of that. And it really is. And once the switch was flipped, I've never gone back. Like gone. Like I just don't experience fear. And I don't wonder whether I will, which is sort of, would be the earmark of the fact that I haven't really transcended it. And I'm really just waiting for the next time that it's triggered. But it's just not part of the deal. But how do you affect the world? How do you help others get out from under that? That's a whole other thing. Les, I know you've been talking, but you're also on mute. Are you talking to somebody else?
Yeah, I think he's on some.
He's in a conversation.
Calls.
Okay, good. Then
Yeah.
I won't unmute him. And I'm complete. Colin, what's by you on this? I know you're busy like capturing mapping, but.
Ah.
There we go. Sorry. What's so funny?
Well, we were talking about intuition yesterday and the reason for mapping, but now we're totally in the fifth dimension, my friend.
Yeah. There are levels of
Called in.
cognitive dance. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from some people are some soulful things, and the theme is blocking, right? So I don't know if these things are officially blocks or if they're always blocks, as we don't really know the extent of some things. So yeah, I do hear that we all seem to have a connection, which is an Anna a thing that she says is each person here, I know a little about them, and I know with Anna what's very important is connection. And so I think we have that here. That's a part of, and it's kind of a virtual local, sort of like we're in the same town. We know each other, although we're all over the earth. So it's a nice common thing, like a coffee shop experience, which is nice. And then then we have what we want to give back to the world and what our gift is, and maybe more of an supportive role for projects and things we might want to, works that we want to produce or whatever. So there's that dimension, which is more of a global thing. And then there's the biasm of our upbringing that Doug talks about, and the world lined in fear that we navigate. And it's not all fear, but you have to be vigilant. So it's all lined in fear, right? So it's not all free everywhere. It's all 24/7. So, and I think a big theme for me lately has been freedom of speech, or trying to understand, right? And not just to speak it, but to be able to back it up, or at least care to back it up in some way. Because I think roots are deep, and in order to be able to do something like that, you have to know that you're part of something bigger. So that's the global thing, right? What you bring globally. So it's interesting, just as a side example, that you could come across another culture and be accused of not being kind to that culture just because you don't like the things that they do. Doesn't mean you don't think that they should be able to do them. Go ahead and do it if you like. It's just, I want to put a fence between us because it's loud or it's whatever. So I guess coexistence is the theme that's coming out of barn raising that I like. So that's kind of what's brewing for me here. And I see it as a huge, huge block for people to understand one another. There's so many different dimensions of slippery slopes, in different angles. And I think Doug hits on it on the biasms that we're brought up with. And so it's one thing to be against somebody's, preferences. You might not have the same preferences as somebody else, but it's another thing to be against their right to have preferences or think that they deserve preferences. So, and if they can back them up, then, Amanda? Yeah, so if they can back up their preferences.
There's more movements.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out whose movement is more important now. So
yeah. So yeah, it's kind of in that realm of that human adapter thing. Like, how do you bring people together who are different, that would like to talk, and give them fair footing so that they don't feel that wall of fear, and they have to have the courage to recognize that. And then if they don't have anything to say, they can go back to the kids' table, because we really need people who can actually say things and do things. And some people are out there, pretending, and that's a big pet peeve. So I guess it comes down to, I don't want to insult anybody unintentionally. There's some really bad ideas out there, so looking for better. Anyway, I'll end with that. Thank you.
maybe we can go to Harry and see why he was moving so much. It was probably a joke or something.
I was seeing you starting to move, and I just reinforced your signal.
Oh, good.
But I also can.
That's what I saw too.
I
Okay.
can also add my thoughts. And what's key to me in this conversation is how fear rules us, or will we allow fear to rule us? Because fear was kind of a decisive value in Colin's conversation, I thought. With that, I'm complete for the moment. But I'm over to you, Amanda, because you got some,
Oh,
you spoke a lot with colonies, got some ahas there. I'm
yeah,
very
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it triggered me because
Hold on.
I don't,
Fear, yes, but I think fear is an obstacle to understanding. I guess
Yeah.
understanding's the main thing.
but
So, and there's many slopes, many contexts that can trap us up. How do we recognize them? That's what I'm saying.
I wanted to get beyond the niceties. Because, and you're pinned again. Why do I have you in my screen? Let me see. What's going on? I'm back. Or not. I don't know. So I was wondering, you triggered actually something, Colin, because we had a lot of like religious discussions, and then you try to get beyond the judgment stage of, what religious people sometimes do. And then now you say like, everybody should be able to be diverse, and so we shouldn't really judge. So everybody should have a space. But what if somebody does something totally against you?
No, I don't think that. I think you have to back it up. That's all. So if somebody does something against you, they're not backing it up well.
I want to go to when it's really against you. So, for example, I did some reading, but I was just thinking of Sodom and Gomorrah at the moment. So it's really interesting. So what if it's so inhospitable that you cannot live in that area, and that it's the custom, So you can say people are free to kill each other, or people are free to, but they're not. So it is actually touching some very vital part of, that we maybe either we try to capture it in universal human rights, or we try to capture it in supporting life, but there's things that can happen that so I don't know. I just wanted to put on the agenda the topic of being hospitable to each other, um, as a matter of importance when we speak on this topic. And I think we cannot avoid it. To how do you say that? We can be artificially diverse and artificially happy and polite. So I feel a struggle inside of you, and there's also serious stuff happening in the world. And so I don't know, I just feel into your words now, and then I feel like something is missing, and I wanted to put this into the equation somehow. And it has some,
you speak a déjà vu. It's like it's really heavy. It's like I feel like
heavy.
I feel like we've been here before, like this
No, but
exact
also,
thing.
I must explain myself. I have been doing a trajectory of 2.5 years with an apocalyptic Orthodox Christian who's basically telling me that sharing and all this happiness was way too light. And I have been going through that journey, and I've been seriously looking into, not only deep fear, but also deep concern about world peace. And so deep issues that are normally you try to avoid them, but I have tried to look there. And I think there's a treasure in that what's the treasure? The treasure is like a deep layer of understanding that being hospitable towards each other is not just a superficial layer of, pronouncing that you're fine with people. It's gonna go through our journey sometimes, and in that hard journey, there's like essentials that when you bring them, then you'll get beyond them in a good way. It's like going camping. You just need to bring your sleeping bag. it's like so it's maybe, that's what I'm pondering now. What do you need to bring in order to be hospitable, even when it's getting hard?
Well, I think, not to jump in, maybe somebody else wants to speak, but I think it has to do with, you're saying you would like to be able to know somebody's intention, so that
Mm-hmm.
and that is the part of the steel manning process of asking lots of questions. To some people, don't like to be asked questions, and some people don't want to have a conversation. So that's another dimension. So, you have to agree to have a conversation, or I think there's another category where you have an intervention where you need to have a conversation. And that may be in the case where somebody is against, so they ignore or shun you, and you need to somehow speak to that. So you may need to, if for some reason you're being blocked, have a way to address that. Not everybody can coexist. Not all ideas can coexist. But I think to know why is important, and it can be dangerous. So I think there's that whole light area where, there's a tendency to smooth things over and keep it civil and friendly. And I think that is important too, because if we think too much about our troubles, then we'll be in that zone all the time. So I don't know. There's a balance of mental health there somewhere, of contemplating the depth of the complexity and troubles and what's better, as opposed to just trying to have a good meal and a good evening, or some nice Chinese food or something like this. So yeah, I think it's what you were talking about is knowing somebody's intention, because if you know their intention, then if they intend to harm you or they tend to help you, that's a big piece of information.
Can I sort of reframe that a little bit? On an underlying sort of root basis through an experiential lens, it's sort of more, I think, more about safety. So, am I safe here? Can I share or reveal me here? And that's a two-way street. That can be me sharing about me. That's also how I react to you, like how I react to what somebody else is saying, because there's huge information and exposure and visibility in, responding to things around you. So it's not necessarily just an egocentric, is it safe for me to do me, be me, and express me? And if my steady state is fear, then there's also sort of an internal capability dimension in terms of my own internal resilience as to whether I'm able to receive from others without morphing that or turning that into an attack. So, the whole, I really think sort of the foundational and core issue of what does it take to make it safe enough for somebody to relax, to just be able to be without looking for the next incoming. And the larger challenge on an extrapolated basis is, what can I do and how can I generatively contribute to helping as many other people as humanly possible feel safe and heard and acknowledged and recognized, just on the most basic fundamental level. Because the knowing intentions is already an adversarial winner-loser, aggression-rooted construct. Are you friend or foe? And if I'm asking that question, that's how I'm experiencing reality. So with that, I'm complete.
I'm curious how Sam is after yesterday.
Doug probably shared with you that we said goodbye to Zeus yesterday,
Oh,
and that was very hard on my daughter,
yes.
very hard on me, very hard on Gail.
Hmm.
So thank you for asking. The other two, the girls, Hera has been spending weeks licking Zeus's face, trying to make him feel better.
Oh,
But we actually have 10 baby puppies, Zeus's offspring, and they're thriving.
good.
Veronica's already picked out a name for the one that we're going to keep.
Good.
She's going to call him Rumpelstiltskin, Rumple for short. And then Veronica's friend Trinity came from Linwood, about an hour away, to spend the day with Veronica.
Hmm.
Actually quite good. She spent the night, so they're still sleeping.
Hmm.
Yeah. I keep looking when I'm driving, I'm looking in the car, trying to see Zeus's face in the rear, because that's where he normally is. He's always with me, so I will have to get used to this,
Hmm.
or get over it, not get used to it.
Hmm.
But thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to disrupt the flow here.
No. It's good. It's also flow. I'm glad you could make a decision. It was hard yesterday to go and make one.
Yeah. The vet basically said she was surprised how aggressively the tumors were growing, and it was not going to get any better. The medication was staving it off a little bit. It was also hard that I was going to be gone the next 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want things to get really, really bad when I was not here. I wanted to be here to say goodbye to Zeus.
Yes. Well, we should have strength. But I don't know. It's a strange period. Yeah.
It is strange. Yeah. I think just 3 days ago, Gail's best friend, Shelley, disclosed to Gail that she had liver cancer.
Mm.
So it's another tough situation to deal with.
Mm.
Anyway, sorry to miss most of this, but I'm back for the last 45
Glad
minutes.
you're here. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah.
So I'm not in Canada, but this is Thanksgiving weekend for Canadians. And we're a week out of a federal election as well. So that's interesting. And this was last year when we really knew that my brother was really sick. And so it's been a year of death and so many different expressions of it. Sam, I'm so sorry. It's like really, I know what it's like to lose such a close friend, because Chili I lost as well. And love is powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With how your sister is doing, or
She's doing pretty good. So Terry, one of her eyes just kind of went out of whack. So one of her eyes was paralyzed, and the other was kind of went into another direction. So she's posted some pretty funny memes about it and been in really good spirits about the whole thing. She's like, I see you and you.
Yeah, she was really sick and couldn't process it, right?
But they're coming back in line, and it seems like it's a one-off thing and not a part of a
Cancer.
larger condition. So yeah, she's recovering well and giving her eye a good workout, going back to work this week, at least part-time. So things are on the mend. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam, thank you for sharing the strong felt sense of how much you loved this dog in your life. You loved the dog, and the dog loved you, and it was always visible on camera. And thanks for sharing this loss with us.
And the love.
Sometimes I think it's so silly, but he had almost no malicious moment ever in his entire life, you know. The worst you could say about Zeus is he was so happy sometimes his tail would knock over small children.
If only we could be like dogs.
Yeah.
That's a great thing.
Oh,
That's a great thing. It was
immediate response.
I never became that person.
What person's that?
They're still alive.
Well, the saying is, I hope one day to become the person my dog thinks I am.
How do you know? Are you sure? A better question might be.
And I let him down. I didn't find the cancer soon enough.
You can't take that.
I wish it worked like it doesn't.
Thing about dogs is they live in the moment.
Exactly.
There's no past, there's no future. It's just right here, right now. So happy to see you. Like that's you know, that is an aspiration, to be more like them, to be in the present, just to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Bang on.
It's like that's the whole deal. And everything around us is pulling us either looking into the past or into the future. Like, how dare you stay in the present? That's not okay. You might actually start thinking and doing things,
That you love.
are not controlled programmed or in service to being fulfilling your part of the machine. God forbid. It's really insane. So yeah, like majorly, if we could just be more like dogs.
Yeah.
Like
a lot more wiggling would happen for one.
Oh
like,
yeah. Oh yeah. Cheryl and I are currently going through formal dog training with our
You guys are training to be dogs?
Well, yeah, because that's exactly what it is, right? It's training human beings to not drive their dogs out of their minds. It's just like, we're both certified to teach a parenting course, and that's the same thing. It's like how to train parents not to drive their children insane or set them up for a lifetime of therapy. And for all the work I've done and for all the work I do in workshops and coaching and all that stuff, the learning from this dog training is just breathtaking in terms of really taking the very last vestigial projection of power out of the equation. That's really what it's been about for me. And so her technique for teaching the dog to heel is you use like an 8-foot lead and you hold your end with your thumb. And there's absolutely no exertion of force. You know, and you see most people with their dogs on leashes and they're pulling on them. And if you pull a dog left, they'll push right. If you pull a dog back, they'll push forward. They'll always do the opposite of application of force. And this is like, ask your dog to walk next to you. It's not about forcing it to walk next to you, pulling it to walk next to you, you know, driving it to walk. It's like, how do you get it to just learn that you'd like it to walk next to you? Oh my God. And I thought I was like, you know, pretty good. Like I'd gotten that one nailed. And no. You know, finally at 63, I'm getting the last of the no power over with a, you know, 15-pound animal. Huge learning, huge learning.
I'm reading a question of Colin.
Yeah, Colin, what does that question mean for you? Same here.
I like your questions, Colin. It's all about balance.
Well, the thing is if you want to attempt some kind of motion, flow, make things better, your occupation, whatever it is that you have, your gift, they could say, if you're going to follow that through, you're going to have to do it in several contexts. Or if you're like a dog, then it would just all be present. So I think being present is a good skill, but we can't remain there. We have to think ahead and maybe learn from history a bit if we can get it recorded correctly and discussed correctly, because, you know, I think a lot of going forward is digging back into what might have happened, and too much time going backwards is maybe some time wasted. So I think Doug was mentioning how, maybe it was Doug or some other talk I've been listening to. I guess this balance is in the idea of some of this neoliberal kookery that's going on, as opposed to what it is to be liberal. And I think people are losing what it means. Oh, that's so cute. What it means to be on the left. So I don't even think it means anything to be on the left anymore for me. So I guess what I'm saying is, in this question, if we weave our intention back into our level of presence, whether we're presence like a dog in the moment, or we're thinking ahead or in the past, you know, how can we have, you know, serious conversations that are local between us, and maybe global, that you project out more rhetorically to the world and maybe academically. And I guess it's the balance between having light conversations and heavy conversations. You know, how do you have the social intelligence to and wherewithal to respect those domains and identify them? You know, I think it's framing, definitely, Doug. And I think with Sam, I think, you know, he shows an arrow towards coexistence. So, you know, and I think it would be interesting to dive into some of the lighter sayings that stand for what we believe. like coexistence, or I've heard Sam go into that quite a bit. It's quite clear, and some of what Doug has said about all for one and one for all. What does that look like? Once you start looking at different contexts, and maybe in some regards, it's not meant to be sliced and diced into different slots. As far as I think that's where he was going with the talk about the bell curve and whether people are sick or healthy mentally. I think he was saying it's more of a better question of, do they feel safe, and what about the fear? So Doug has a definite direction towards the person being in a good place before you try, very social. So I think these are all very important things to dive into, and the question is, how do you do it lightly or heavy without getting too wrapped up in adversarial or become an activist, or when do you need to become an activist, those kinds of things. It's a balance of deep thought. Go ahead, Amanda.
Activism is fine.
Not 24/7.
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's do it 24/7 then.
But according to Tim, it's called advocacy, but that's fine. I call it activism, and it means I'm active. It means I'm awake. And it means I'm not going to sleep by 5 or waking up by 5 or whatever. And there's no difference between me and me.
Well, there was a philosopher, I think, said life depends upon not contemplating it too much. Now, I don't know who said that, or if that was right. Maybe somebody more scholar than me knows that reference.
There was another thing I wanted to say, and now I'm losing it, because what was it? Balance. The notion of safety is not being without fear. Being safe is more than that.
That's why you need courage and allow yourself to be vulnerable. Because if you can't meet the fear, they say run towards the fear. Now, I don't know how good of an idea that is, but sometimes you must, I guess. If you have people who are helping you and supporting you, it's a lot easier to make those difficult decisions. And to just do everything alone, I think, may be a mistake.
No, I just want to point out that we're making a duality between fear and safety. But safety is something, comfortable. And being without fear is just enough to stay alive. So it's something different. It's different when you're, with a nice, cozy campfire and you feel warm and you feel cherished and loved. And I don't know, it's very different than you're not fearful. So being without fears is not comfortable enough to be safe, I would say.
I would think there are layers to that, where the base elements of human health would be the fear question. But on top of that, you can explore all kinds of different preferences. And, some people might not like to be outside with the campfire and the bugs. But, but that you can enjoy that, and you're allowed to enjoy that, or find ways to enjoy that, I guess, is the thing. Whether it's, looking at mushrooms or whatever it is, we have to, how do you feel responsible at the same time? Give yourself the luxuries that you've been afforded. How do you not feel guilty? Or how much do you commit? Or all these weird questions, and how much do you stop thinking about it and just meditate and look for that blank piece of paper? Some things I don't try very often, but I think that's one of the influences some people have here, talking about different kinds of awareness and quieting the mind. That's an old, ancient, sagacious thing that, I don't really practice too much, at least not intentionally.
It's impossible. It's not impossible. It's that it's too fast. In starting, Colin, with your share, like 2-3 shares back, where you opened with you have to be thinking into the future, and the past can inform that because there's learnings there, and which, in other words, which is back to this paradigm of, you know, got to be in the past or got to be in the future. Got to be in the past, got to be in the future. And the question is this sort of like fundamental threshold why. What's wrong with the emergent? What's wrong with the co-emergence, co-creation, co-evolution, and manifestation of whatever the it is? And so much of the string of questions you raised and the additions Amanda made hit my ear as sort of compounded things being piled on top of things. And underlying them, what's your truth in those shares? What's your truth in those challenges, in those dualities? And it's sort of like, you know, the frame we're in is designed to keep us, confounded and confused. It's designed to keep us like unclear about where am I at right now, this minute, in relation to fill in the blank. And that requires creating the time and the space to feel into that, not think into that, but to actually feel into that. And as long as the pressure and the busyness and the rushes to the future and to, you know, what can we learn from the past, and to how can we capture this moment so that we can add it to the past so that it'll inform the future, and just all of that stuff, it's what keeps us disconnected from what we know on a being basis. There's like this whole universe of knowing on a present here now in this moment. You know, the indigenous populations know that, never forgot that. And there's so much more their signal they're receiving, information that they're getting, sense stuff that they're aware of in the present, because they expand and honor the present, right here, right now, this minute. And am I like tuned in, dialed in, and receiving everything that is going on right now, this minute around me? And my sense of me in relation to all of that, and all of that in relation to me and the boundaries of my physical being. So I just throw that out. Yeah, Greta's perfect. She's a perfect model and example of that. You know, her being in the moment in relation to climate change, and her speaking from that truth in that place. And look at the power of that. It's really simple. It's just unbelievably simple, and it is so powerful. And look at how terrified so many people are in the face of that, especially white men in positions of power.
That power gets changed when people interfere from another time presence with her. So when they don't accept the truth in the moment as she speaks it, but they start to rewind and play again, and then say, oh, she made it up, or oh, it's not true, or oh, she's making people opposed to her, and then they're projecting this other reality than the truth that she's actually speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And how powerful is every other man, woman, and child on the planet doing themselves in the present as a contributor if they're freed from the fear that has got them oppressed, suppressed, locked up, and terrified.
I don't know why it's not the same topic, Doc, but I was just wondering while we were speaking whether the rules for coexistence, and then I include coexist in peace, because I think that is what Sam means, not just to coexist and be hostile. It's possible too. Whether the rules to coexist in peace are actually at the current moment, shifting on a geopolitical level. And in me is some sort of great resistance against polarization on that level. I'm just like, come on, it's not kindergarten anymore. Stop that nonsense. But on the other hand, it's happening. So I see those two things happening. And so coexistence in peace, it has certain requirements, and I do not think it's only in trade or in respecting nationality or national interests or the old political game that looks like very 3D to me when I look at the television, where I try to avoid. So I was wondering how we could list those requirements, just, to do a minor exercise in 10 minutes on the geopolitical level. Why not? I think we can enter it here. I don't think we have a lot of problems here to do that.
That sounds like a great idea to put on the to-do list for the experiments. Like, I think we can have subgroups to take the higher level stuff away and do little workshops. But yeah, Sam, I won't speak to your thing on peace, although it'd be interesting if I could pull out your card number 25 that explains that.
I don't think it's my card. I don't want to claim ownership of it. I just want to spread that message and have it channeled. Because I think that one of the best things we do here, or we could do and are doing, I think, in GCC, is to disagree well, to model disagreement, to really show how we can actually do it generously and curiously with a kind of a learning mindset, as opposed to coming to disagreement with discomfort, with revulsion, with tendency to violence and conflict. I think that if the world doesn't figure this out, then all that violence persists. And if we can actually show how we can disagree well and really learn from each other about how these thousands of years of history and culture produce the positions that they've produced, and start chipping away at that.
I want to interrupt, Sam, because Colin distracted the topic that I brought in and put it aside and put it on the to-do list and put it into small groups for a next time. But I meant now. Actually, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
We could agree to that.
But I mean, I don't want to be put aside without it even being noticed.
Okay, write it to the moderator. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put it aside. It was only a suggestion, but I didn't try to beeline you. I think I was going to speak on behalf of Sam while he had his puppy, but I was glad that I don't have to, because I've heard Sam on this a few times and he's really spoken to coexistence. So I think he's only answering your query, and then we'll hand it back to you.
Sure.
Doug's the
I just
moderator.
wanted to take out the little, the thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there should be a way we could vote on doing an exercise or not. I don't know. Think about that.
Perhaps.
Okay.
There's a classic moment right here, right now. So, Amanda, you put on the table what you put on the table.
Mm.
Sam, Colin invoking the disagreement meme,
Mm-hmm.
and Sam speaking to it in terms of if we can disagree well. And so peeling back to a fundamental underlying construct like you were talking about tackling, which, by the way, I'm in support of, I believe in. I don't think it's a complicated, big, long list. It's really basic. But it's interesting how language derails. And this is where, Fabian and I spent 18 months deprogramming and delanguaging, getting rid of language that by using it pulls you into the old paradigm, and you're not going anywhere new.
No.
You're not defining anything new. So the construct, Sam's construct of disagreeing well, is predicated on disagreement as a given, as a fixed feature of the landscape, which I don't necessarily find appealing for me, because if I want to construct and build new, I don't want to build it on top of a foundation that's predicated on the meme of disagreement. It's sort of like I'm going to evolve to a non-disagreement frame by starting by building on the word disagreement. No, doesn't work for me, because if I invoke it and use it, then I'm predicating and building a construct based on the idea and meme of disagreement being part of the landscape. It's not discretionary. It's not something I can choose to not invite to the party. I can relate to the idea of differences of opinion as a starting place where two people have two different ideas about the same subject matter or same domain. But that doesn't necessarily map to, quote, disagreement. It means that there's a difference of opinion between two people, and how they interact and relate to that determines whether we're doing something new, a la Amanda's construction of a frame and list that we want to describe and will need to in words, and disagreeing well. So the disagreeing well, I end up hearing as, let's practice the old form and do it better stylistically. I don't want to be in a disagreement frame. I want to be in a inquiry into questioning, openness, generative, accepting, and judgment-free frame of working through things with others. And with that, I'm complete.
I'm a little bit triggered. Let me just put that out there, okay? Because when you say, let's not use these terms, I hear you making assumptions about the word disagreement. And there wasn't that curious diving into what did I mean by disagreement. There was a very direct disagreement that happened right away. And that's what I'm saying. I can completely agree with you. I can actually map my word disagreement into your word miscommunication or some other word miscommunication, and we can actually have that curious generative conversation. But to immediately say, that's not what I want, without really delving into it, kind of is invoking that theme that you started with, Doug, which is, why do you want to invite disagreement to the table? You modeled it, in a sense, by just saying, that's not what I want. Now, I'm making a lot of assumptions here as well, but I am curious about that particular expression, because one word is just one word. We can actually dive into it, say it's miscommunication, it's misunderstanding, it's different terminology, it's connotations, it's implications. But just to say outright, that ain't it, I want something else, is flat out rejection and pretty close to disagreement. Over.
Can I respond? It was also the sequence of things, Sam. So Doc was in time frame responding to the sequence of things from me to Colin to you, and then you were in the end of the sequence. So you're sizing it down to your part. That's fine, but just for us to scope both things at the same moment, maybe it will help.
Yeah, and the point that I was making is language, a word is not just a word. Language is extraordinarily powerful on not just on a dictionary definition or definitions basis, but on a projective basis in terms of energy, meaning, connotation, association. And for the vast bulk of people within the cultural frame we live in, disagreement has a fundamentally conflict, fear, power, energy to it that is just indisputable. That's not up for debate or discussion or opinions. That's like the reality of that word. It carries that. Not just from a dictionary definition standpoint, but from an intention standpoint. So when I say the word doesn't work for me, I'm not looking to construct my new reality with language that carries all that baggage with it, plays that past forward into the new. I'm not coming from a disagreement place or an opinion place. I'm coming from a discretionary place. For me, I don't invite language to my party that I believe contaminates colors and affects whatever the new emergent that I'm looking to help birth in the world. It's completely about discretion and choice. It's not about opinion. It's not about, your meaning versus my meaning versus Amanda's meaning. It's not about any of that. It's just having become acutely aware of the power of language and choice of language.
Can I add minor thing?
I'm clear. I'm
Sorry.
complete.
Thank you, Doc. Also, my question was about how to coexist in peace and what are new and modern requirements for that. Now, there's different ideas about if you can coexist in peace and disagree. I mean, some cultures are really good at it. And I think Tammy and Harry know that France is good at that. You can disagree heavily and have a good wine and dinner and party and dance. but mostly the word has other connotations. So just to say where I was emerging from was going somewhere else.
Tim, you had your hand up, but then I'll respond as well.
Well, in the lived experience in this space, I have walked away when there's disagreement. And I don't know if that was the right choice for me to make or not. But I know that investing my time in conflict-laden situations, I came to realize that in a similar way that Doug is saying, I just don't want to language it that way. I just don't want to have that fight, or I don't want to be in a field of disagreement or proving or battling the point, or that's not, I'm not here to sharpen my sword. I'm here to see and find others that vibrate in coherent capacitance with me. And that might be as simple as telling a story that's meaningful, or seeing if a connection can be made that can further and assist something, or to clarify or ask questions, or whatever it is. But This last year, which has been a year of death for me, is also been about how am I going to choose to spend my time and attention? And if it's discord, what I've discovered this year is I can say no and I'm out. And, you know, I think that that's also part of it. So, and it's not anti-coexistence. It's actually full pro-coexistence, because, you know, the people that exhibit behaviors that I don't want to engage with, they're doing what they're doing for a purpose, and I trust that 100%. It's just not my job to have to do this. And I'm a strong personality. True. And and at the same time, I want to bring my light, and I want to bring the goodness that I have, because I think the world needs it, and I need it, and I don't think it serves me to be in an energy of intransigence or discord. And I'm going to choose with my feet. And that's what I discovered this year. And the jury's out on, you know, if every choice was a good choice. Probably not. But I just wanted to offer that real experience in terms of coherence and incoherence and coexistence in my lived experience here in this space.
So may I just say one thing, and that is, I echo yours, Doug's, Amanda's, Tammy's feelings about being in those spaces where the energy is awesome, co-creative, generative. The world, I think, is not yet entirely there. And the question is, if I want to ensconce myself in a community where only that feeling exists, that's fine. But that's an echo chamber of a sort. And that's also not recognizing and, in a sense, co-creating in a relative way with the rest of the world. And that's where I think the work exists, is to really help the world get to where you are, Doug, Tammy, others. I'm not recognizing that that's not the ideal. I definitely recognize that's the ideal. But we're not there as a world yet. And how do we build that if we just pull ourselves away and just go to our own little island?
Can I also give some reflection? I don't know. Sorry, are you, I don't know.
Amanda, Amanda, can you wait one sec? Because what Sam just shared, I wanna unpack.
Yeah, but I cannot respond to Tammy anymore then.
Okay, go ahead.
I felt somewhat triggered because it feels forceful to say, I vote with my feet and I'm out. Basically, when you're telepathic, you're not out. You're never out. You're connected and it will affect you, whether you like it or not. And it feels to me like you're actually very sensitive and you're forcefully disconnecting on purpose because you're scouting that realm, or I don't know. I feel something is wrong with it. And it may have triggered me also in the past that if you do that, I'm just like, what? Because it feels like it's not true. So this is just my simple, and to reflect on Sam then in the same time, if it's not true and we're interconnected, then how can we unpeacefully coexist while we're connected? That's bizarre. That's it.
So Sam, I think you're conflating two things, because being in the place that we're talking about.
I'd like to interrupt just for a second. He's conflating it on your map, not on his. as the map maker. I'd just like to state that out.
Yeah, well, of course. This is, my version. So yeah, of course. So being and coming from where I'm coming from a values perspective and a decision and choice perspective, doesn't put me in an echo chamber. It informs and governs how I relate and respond to all of the diversity that exists in the world. So it informs and defines whether I engage with somebody who is being argumentative or adversarial or pugnacious or whatever, how I choose to respond to that. Or in service to Tammy's share, not respond to that, like not engage, and to just let it go by. And I didn't hear Amanda in Tammy's share that there was a disconnecting from what she was choosing not to engage with. That the choice to not engage isn't a denial, on a projective assertive basis. It doesn't necessarily mean that equals a denial or adversity to what is not being engaged with. The fact that I'm making a choice that it's not for me doesn't necessarily carry with it a judgment of the person I'm choosing not to engage with.
No, I respect your voice.
It's a judgment not for me. So, and I get the energy that was shared with, but I've never gotten from Tammy an intentionality reflecting the energy you're picking up on. What I'm hearing the energy more as, I spent so fucking long engaging, I finally figured out I get to say no and not engage. Yeah. and in that I can cut the slack and go, yeah, I appreciate like what that feels like. I know what that feels like discovering the ability to say no or to just not. But,
in my European ears, it sounds somewhat different. And I remember our discussions with me and Tammy about sovereignty, for example. So I feel a sort of sorry to say this is a cultural dimension also. And sorry, for me, the North Americas, they're all Americas. I don't care between the difference of Canada and for me, it's just the same continent. And I feel somewhat an imposing in the voice and in the smile. And I'm very much responding to it. So, and I'm just dealing with my ear. So I'm not only responding to words, but I understand what you're saying, Doc. I understand. And yeah, that's there too. I don't know. So.
Let me just ask another question. Could you not see that these positions are positions of privilege? Most people don't get to make these decisions. Most people can't really withdraw that way.
Could you be more specific, Sam?
Yes. I think that when there's shots, ringing down the block, or there are people being hanged in your square, you can't just say, I don't want to deal with disagreement.
I'd also like to mention that can happen at an equally real but less visible way. And I think Greta Thunberg has the tail of a tiger there.
Yeah, I'm giving extreme examples, but in the real world, if you want to talk about what is indisputable, Doug, there is disagreement. There is conflict. And used to say that's not the word that you want to resonate with.
I would like to distinguish the disengaging on will or the disengaging on consciousness. There's a difference between that. So once your consciousness is in a certain aha, you cannot even take yourself somewhere else than where you are. It's not even a matter of choice. If it will cost you your life or not, your consciousness is just going there.
Agreed.
It's a weird experience, but when it's going, and from the one or the other second, things are different. But when you put it on will, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between how you engage with where disagreement exists versus whether or not you actually want to resonate with that notion in your own model. I think there's a fine distinction there. And what I'm trying to talk about with disagreeing well is to come at those disagreements without that old conflict-driven I win, you lose, or lose, or win-lose model. If we can actually co-create something where both of us can learn and co-create something better in the face of an original disagreement, where we can actually not dispute that they exist, I think that's a better way of handling it. And that's, I think, the opportunity and privilege we have here, and responsibility. And not just to say, oh, I choose to not look at it this way.
And this is where I have the privilege to disagree with you, Sam.
Agreed, completely agreed. But if we can do this co-generatively, in a co-creatively and co-curiosity-driven way, then we both can learn. But to have my one statement be immediately rejected and saying, that's not what I want, is not a curious and generative way to do it, in my opinion.
Wow, it's burning for me.
Okay.
Burning for me. Okay. So this is if I could put like a title above everybody's square, like maybe that would be a game we could play. I'd put coexistence above Sam's. Above Doug's, I'd have to put feel the love or something, because he's all about anti-fear. And each person has their specialty. So you don't go to the dentist if you have a broken bone, unless it's your tooth, I suppose. But so maybe it's just a matter of specialties conflicting here, and that's the whole point of having context and a place to start on a trail. So if you can define your semantics and decide whether it's important enough to have the conversation or if you're wasting your time or not, what is your intention? What are you trying to gain from this? What are you defending? How are you trying to get into a safe place from a fearful place? Then everybody's I'll wrap it up. If you can establish a safe zone where you almost enter a game and say, this is the game we're playing, this is the intention, we're going to be here for this amount of time, and let's see if we can't move the ball ahead. Let me know what you are trying to get at. I'll try to understand what you're trying to get at. And this is all very expensive, so it has to be important. So I can respect somebody wanting to veto a long drawn out conversation that's not necessary to have. So the question is, when is it important to have it? What's at stake? If it's fight or flight, there is no conversation. It's just escape. So anyway, I think that's a very important distinction. And then as you put the layers on top of that safe zone, as Doug says, how do you engage the language so that you're not alienating and everybody feels that they can speak? And then there's the other area where I think Amanda comes in and says, and Sam comes in, and I agree with, and it's the showstopper. What about people who cannot agree? There are just inseparable differences, and that I'll leave it there.
I was going for some semantics there.
Okay.
Hold on one sec. Jazz, you raised your hand and I haven't heard your voice.
Well, what comes to my mind are words like argument, debate, learning. If you don't learn having an argument passionately, who decides where to draw the line? If you decide personally, that's a personal decision. And as we've already agreed that we may not have that privilege. And if you don't learn how to argue, how are you going to learn to debate? And if you have the privilege of withdrawing, what would you do then next? If you're still in discord, would you declare war without a further argument?
It's arguing and agreeing well is the
You have
problem.
to come back to the table time and time and time again till you've exhausted all avenues before you start putting bullets in your revolvers and your guns and getting your missiles out. You can't give up on this. If you give up, then we will be back to the old paradigm. Argue passionately, argue till you cry, argue till you're blue in the face.
Within the guidelines, I think that you have to establish together.
But there are no guidelines. You're going to go into semantics.
Well, that I tell you, that's what it feels like to argue with a bully.
If you withdraw, it's kind of like saying, I'm not going to vote. And then you have to agree with whatever the vote is. I'm complete.
I barely got to get my semantics joke off the ground.
Try again.
Sam, some antics, please. It sounded better in my head.
So I'm leaning towards the effective takeaway for me is learning to have a way to have these conversations if they're valuable enough, if you're invested enough, if you're not going to run away from it. Doesn't mean you can't take a time out, but if you're not having, and it doesn't have to be because of disagreement, but it is a starting place. I disagree with you. Let's talk about that. No, I disagree with you. I'm never going to listen to you again. And I'm telling your mommy and all this stuff. It's like people get all emotional and they start to bully you and manipulate you. That's not a conversation, and that's politics, right? So, how do we sit down and say, this is the game board and we're going to create it? Like, that's what I've been doing for quite some time. And I need to find my own space to lay it out so that it's understood. I think meta understood, but it's very interesting. And I'm sure I'm not the first to say, wouldn't it be nice if we could have a real conversation and track it? I think people who write books do that, and they lay it all out in the end.
I need to leave, and I just want to say that listening to this, it feels like it's a very good example of what Sam is talking about, which is arguing or disagreeing well. It feels like it's happening, and if as a result somebody wants to leave, well, that's up to them, but that's how it appears to me, that it's actually a really good example of people trying to find ways to agree, but at the same time, there's a lot of basic disagreement, which, as Sam said, that's the way it is out in the world. We can't shut our eyes to that. So anyway, lovely to see you all, guys, and I need to go. Bye.
So
We are at the top of the hour, so next contributions should be closing contributions. Yeah. If I could ask that of everybody.
Even now the conclusions carry the disagreement meme, so I'm not so happy about that. And so I just put in the chat something quite vital. If you look at it from a manifestation point of view, this whole idiocy of making specialties is just to avoid disagreement, so we don't have to make anything, so we don't have to engage really, so we don't get to be responsible, so we can hide in our own boundaries. And I'm just like, oh my God, you just explained why we got to specialties in the first place, Colin. That's wonderful. It's a discovery. So I had a great aha moment there. I just wanted to share it. because otherwise it's just
Make
gone.
specialty bad. I don't
Sorry?
think that makes specialty bad. I think specialization is one of the ways that we've actually contributed to each other.
No, it is not. It is basically a hiding place for people that cannot cohere so that they can keep into disagreement. So we can have, this is my option. In law of manifestation, it's killing. And the way it was used was, oh, maybe it's not disagreement, maybe it's more specialties. So we try to soften the disagreement by creating so-called specialties that are not really specialties. And that was what I was picking up. And that was just, you know.
It depends where you are on the onion of context, whether it's a specialty or not. If you're out in a general world saying I have a specialty, then you probably are hiding and avoiding. But if you actually do know something that other people are not trained in, I don't know if that's what you mean specifically, but there are people that are skilled at certain things.
I meant specifically you trying to avoid the topic of disagreement by saying, oh, maybe it's specialties. So you try to soften it.
No, I don't soften it. I try to actually engage it.
Yeah, but in a mental way, not in an emotional way. I'm sorry. I have to disagree with you there.
Well, I guess I get rougher and rougher and rougher as the conversation gets rougher and rougher. So once you start pulling out the dirty tricks, I start to pull out the bigger noise.
On an emotional
so, yeah,
level.
I think that is what it is. If I say, okay, well, let's do something together because there's a problem and we need to solve it. You know, can we engage and do that?
I'm sorry, I didn't ask you to solve anything. So this is the problem.
No, I mean, that's what a disagreement.
Problem is,
well, there are some disagreements you can't come past, of course.
The problem is you start solving things while I start to understand manifestation on another level. So there's two different discussions there. And that's okay, but it's a different discussion. I just wanted to put in my part because that's another layer in a parallel.
I'd like to see Harry draw those two layers.
It's also happening. And so we are in parallel universes having different conclusions, which is fine. I'm just noticing that. And that was my outro.
Well, welcome to Unblocking.
Yeah, it is all about layers. I agree. That's why I'm so much about context, because as soon as you jump a valence, it's a different conversation, whether you're talking micro, macro, you're talking cultural. Like, try to agree with some people who have, what is a person? Do we even consider those people when they can't even understand what we're saying? Like, are they
you're
still
mapping
people?
Those parallel universes. So the reason you're mapping is because you're trying to get a hold on those parallel universes. Actually, this is really interesting.
It's not just Colin. Everyone is mapping.
Yeah.
Well,
whether or not they're writing it down, or whether or not they're drawing it, or whether everybody's doing that mapping.
No, I'm speaking of the mental universe of Colin at the moment, and I'm speaking on that very specifically now. It's not meant for everyone. This one is meant for Colin, and it's from me.
I see how the different kinds of mapping integrate, though. That's the beauty. And if you take it serious, you can actually figure out what level you're on and then define those semantics and say, we're talking at this. And that's a great gift, and to feel that you're on the same page as somebody, especially when it's an advanced level. And that's some of the things I see leaking out of the conversation community with John Keldon and some of those things. Like, he's really trying to hit those highs.
So let me make my closing statement, okay? And that is in response to some of the things that I've heard here the last 10, 15 minutes. And that is when I talk about the disagreement phenomenon, and other people say, oh, I don't want to resonate with that word and the energy it brings. I think the difference is that we can take what today is considered disagreement and look at it differently. And that's what I mean by doing disagreement better. By noticing the misunderstandings, the miscommunications, the difference in terms, the difference in context, the different layers of the onion. And before one actually understands that, if you're so quick to judge that that's either good or bad, or not for you, or not for somebody else, or not the appropriate topic, then that curiosity is not demonstrated. That generosity is not demonstrated. And that's what I'm trying to help us lean into. I'm not fixated on the word disagreement. I'm fixated on the phenomenon that exists in the world that we would like to remodel differently. And before we get much into it, I hear a lot of, oh no, it ain't for me. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Over.
Thanks, Sam. I think I heard you and understood you, and I might be wrong as well. Uh, I refrained from engaging a lot in the conversation, and I want to explain why. Because I hear everybody, as you just said, having his own frame of understanding, his own map, his own dictionary, or whatever we use to create understanding in our own mind, and then bringing it back into the conversation as opinions and all of that. So it's very difficult to have a conversation where we speak those different languages all the time. So I just and then I thought, okay, let me just listen and first get my own map, like Colin is always try to understand you before I add my own agreements or disagreements or other colors to it. Over.
Thank you. Love that. That's
Anybody else want to have a say?
Well, I just have one thing. What I think is some interesting semantics is
I
that,
read that. It's very good.
right?
How many minutes has that been
I
brewing?
couldn't laugh at it
How
because
much have
Sam
you
was in full flow at the
cooking
time.
that one up?
Is that you were sharing that Doug was criticizing your language, but then you were criticizing Doug for criticizing the language, and so it has this beautiful symmetry
Yes,
in,
exactly.
and a completeness, right? I just wanted to
Yes.
paint that little part of the
Be a
picture.
hypocrite if you want, but this is exactly what's going on. And I want us to do it
It's
differently.
real. Also, the last thing that I want to say is the reason why I put my experience into the circle is because that's been what I've done, I think, the best in this space. Is I'm like, how do I make what we're talking about real, human, authentic, and vulnerable? I've done this. I have walked away from relationships in this place because of this difficulty in being in coherent, connected space. I found it painful. And I think that that's also real. So I wanted to put my real and lived experience, not as an aggression, but as a owning that I'm flying the colors of human here. And it's not always pretty. And I'm going to be honest about it nonetheless. So with that, I'm complete.
And I want to add to it, while the speaker is still open, that I want to add one word to the conversation, that is trust. I trust everybody in this room, while being totally different in their approaches of whatever we need to do, or there's discord, disagreement, or all the details there. I trust everybody to be of good intent, and I trust everybody to enjoy this company, because we are all still here and coming back, and to me it's nurturing, and I want to thank you for that.
So I'll wrap us up. Colin, do you have a final? Was your last year final, or do you have a final?
He wants to be the bully.
Yeah, no.
My final
Go ahead
thing
there,
is that
Jess.
as the instigator of many of the arguments in the GCC in the last couple of years, it was intentional in many ways, and we are coming to fruition, and I'm ever so glad. It's been hard work. It's a big weight off my shoulders that we're beginning to be coherent, and that we can have an argument, go away, rethink it, come back and represent. And we're losing this idiom of trying to save face. We had a little bit of that today, and it's going away. I'm extremely, extremely pleased. I'm privileged to be here in this position right now. I'm complete.
It took us more than 2 years.
It did, but there we are.
There's still another there.
It takes a long time to do us differently. And it is that is exponentially compounded by the number of people doing it. And we're actually, even the intermittent folk, a robust group of people. So the exponential challenge of going after what has been emergent and manifested here is pretty remarkable and extraordinary and unique in the world. And I certainly don't take it for granted that the people that have hung in, that continue to show up, put shoulder to the wheel with all of the things that traditionally are required for people to do that being absent, is a huge thing that I'm majorly grateful for and appreciative of to all of you. And with that, thank you for this Sunday Unblocking. I loved it. And Sam, we'll do this again. And yeah, it's an iterative thing, just is. And in the meantime, enjoy whatever day or evening it is for you, wherever you are.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Nice
Good to see
so
you.
nice
Yeah.
to see everyone.
Thanks.
Mhm.